Take a moment and try to remember the phone numbers of your 5 closest friends without looking at your phone. Now try to remember every appointment scheduled for the next month without checking a calendar or reminder app. Most people would struggle because modern life allows us to store information outside our own minds. Whenever we forget something, a smartphone, notebook, search engine, or digital assistant is usually available to help. As a result, remembering large amounts of information often feels unnecessary. But for almost all of human history, those external memory systems did not exist. Ancient humans had no notebooks, no maps, no written records, and certainly no smartphones filled with reminders. Yet they successfully remembered enormous amounts of information that were essential for survival. They remembered where reliable water sources could be found during different seasons. They remembered which plants could be eaten safely and which ones could cause illness or death. They remembered migration routes followed by animals across vast landscapes. They remembered social relationships, hunting grounds, dangerous locations, and countless details about the world around them. The amount of information carried inside a person's memory could be astonishing. In many cases, survival depended directly on remembering the right thing at the right time. A forgotten water source during a drought could have serious consequences. A forgotten warning about a dangerous area could place an entire group at risk. Unlike modern people, ancient humans could not simply look up missing information whenever they needed it. Knowledge had to exist inside the mind, because there was often nowhere else to store it. This raises an interesting question. Were ancient humans actually better at remembering things than we are today? The answer is more complicated than it might seem. Human brains have not changed dramatically in the last few thousand years. Your brain is remarkably similar to the brains carried by your hunter-gatherer ancestors. What changed was not the hardware. What changed was the environment. Ancient humans lived in a world that constantly rewarded strong memory and punished forgetting important information. Over countless generations, memory became one of the most valuable survival tools a person could possess. To understand why, we first need to understand just how important memory was in everyday prehistoric life. For ancient humans, memory was not merely a useful ability. It was one of the most important tools available for staying alive in an unpredictable world. Every day presented situations where accurate information could determine success or failure. People needed to remember the locations of rivers, springs, seasonal water holes, and other sources of fresh water. A mistake in remembering where water could be found might force a group to travel farther than expected or face dangerous conditions. Knowledge about plants was equally important. Many environments contained hundreds of species, some edible, some medicinal, and others potentially poisonous. Remembering the differences required years of observation and experience. A single mistake could have serious consequences for an individual or an entire family. Animal behavior also demanded constant attention. Hunters needed to remember migration routes, feeding areas, seasonal patterns, and signs indicating the presence of prey. Successful hunting often depended on recognizing patterns accumulated over many years. The landscape itself became a vast collection of information stored inside the mind. People remembered hills, rivers, caves, distinctive trees, rock formations, and countless other landmarks. These features helped individuals navigate large territories without maps or written directions. Many hunter-gatherer groups traveled across enormous areas while relying almost entirely on memory. Social information mattered just as much as environmental knowledge. People needed to remember relationships, alliances, obligations, family connections, and the reputations of other community members. A person's social survival often depended on understanding these networks accurately. Unlike modern students memorizing information for a test, ancient humans remembered information because they used it constantly. Important knowledge was reinforced through repeated practical application. Every successful journey, hunt, gathering trip, and social interaction strengthened existing memories. Forgetting useful information carried real costs. Remembering useful information produced real rewards. Over time, this created an environment where strong memory became one of the most valuable assets an individual could possess. The human brain responds powerfully when information is connected to survival, emotion, and repeated experience. Ancient humans encountered all three conditions almost every day. Their memories were not necessarily larger than ours, but they often had far stronger reasons to use them. And one of the most fascinating ways they organized that information was by turning the landscape itself into a giant mental map. One of the most remarkable abilities possessed by many ancient humans was the capacity to navigate vast landscapes without written maps. Modern people often depend on GPS systems that provide turn-by-turn instructions for even familiar journeys. Ancient humans relied on something very different. They carried detailed maps inside their minds. Hunter-gatherer groups frequently traveled across territories covering hundreds or even thousands of square kilometers. To outsiders, these landscapes might appear confusing and difficult to navigate. To experienced community members, however, the land was filled with meaningful information. Every hill, river, valley, cave, rock formation, and distinctive tree could serve as a memory anchor. Rather than memorizing isolated facts, people often connected knowledge to specific locations. A water source might be remembered in relation to a particular rock formation. A gathering area might be associated with a certain group of trees. A hunting ground might be linked to a nearby river bend or mountain ridge. This method transformed the environment into a living memory system. Instead of carrying information separately from the landscape, people attached information directly to places they encountered regularly. Modern psychologists sometimes refer to similar techniques as spatial memory systems. The human brain appears exceptionally good at remembering information when it is connected to locations. Ancient humans may have benefited from this ability every day. Some of the most impressive examples come from indigenous Australian cultures. For thousands of years, Aboriginal groups maintained complex systems often called songlines. These songlines combined stories, songs, landmarks, and navigation into a single memory structure. A person could travel long distances by recalling sequences of landmarks embedded within traditional songs. The landscape itself became a memory palace stretching across entire regions. Knowledge about water, food, travel routes, and cultural history could all be preserved within these systems. This demonstrates an important principle about memory. Ancient humans rarely remembered information in isolation. Instead, they connected information to stories, places, experiences, and emotions. These connections made knowledge easier to store and retrieve when needed. A landmark was not merely a landmark. It was a reminder of everything associated with that location. The result was a memory system that expanded naturally as people interacted with the world around them. And perhaps the most powerful tool for preserving information was not the landscape itself. It was the stories people told about it. Long before books, libraries, and written records existed, stories served as one of humanity's most powerful memory technologies. Every evening, families and community members often gathered around fires where information could be shared through conversation, songs, and storytelling. To modern listeners, these stories might sound like entertainment. For ancient humans, they often functioned as educational tools, memory systems, and survival guides, all at the same time. Human brains naturally remember stories better than disconnected facts. A list of instructions is easy to forget. A vivid story filled with characters, emotions, and events is much easier to recall. Ancient communities took advantage of this tendency long before scientists understood how memory works. Important information was often embedded inside narratives that people enjoyed hearing repeatedly. A story about a hunter becoming lost could teach navigation skills. A story about a dangerous animal might contain practical lessons about avoiding certain threats. A story about a drought could preserve knowledge about hidden water sources and seasonal changes. The lesson became easier to remember because it was attached to an engaging narrative. Many myths and legends also preserved environmental knowledge accumulated across generations. Stories described rivers, mountains, migration routes, unusual weather patterns, and important locations across the landscape. Children listening around a campfire were not merely being entertained. They were gradually absorbing a massive amount of practical information about the world around them. Oral traditions allowed communities to preserve knowledge for centuries without writing anything down. Each generation inherited stories from previous generations and then passed them forward to the next. The process functioned almost like a living library stored inside human minds. Some researchers believe certain traditional stories may preserve information that originated hundreds or even thousands of years earlier. The remarkable accuracy of some oral traditions demonstrates just how effective storytelling can be as a memory system. Stories also benefited from repetition. Important narratives were told again and again throughout a person's life. Every retelling strengthened memory and reduced the likelihood that valuable information would be forgotten. In this way, stories acted as containers that carried knowledge safely through time. Facts became easier to remember because they traveled together inside memorable narratives. The result was a powerful educational system that required no books, no classrooms, and no written records. But storytelling was only part of the reason ancient humans remembered so much information. They also practiced memory constantly, because daily life required them to use it almost every single day. Ancient humans did not simply store information in memory. They exercised memory constantly through everyday life. Modern people often rely on phones, calendars, search engines, maps, and reminder apps to remember important details. As a result, many pieces of information can be forgotten without creating serious consequences. Ancient humans lived in a very different environment. Important knowledge could not be outsourced to external systems because those systems did not exist. If someone wanted to remember where water could be found during a drought, the information had to remain active inside the mind. If a hunter wanted to remember migration patterns, seasonal behavior, or successful hunting locations, memory was the only storage system available. This created a powerful cycle of repetition. People regularly recalled important information because they used it repeatedly. Modern neuroscience shows that retrieving information strengthens memory. The more often a memory is used, the easier it becomes to access in the future. Ancient humans benefited from this principle every day. Knowledge about plants was reviewed whenever gathering took place. Knowledge about animals was reinforced during every hunt. Knowledge about geography was strengthened through repeated travel across familiar landscapes. Knowledge about social relationships was maintained through constant interaction with community members. The information remained active because life required frequent retrieval. This process contrasts sharply with the modern experience. Today, many people stop remembering information as soon as they know where to find it. A phone number stored in a smartphone rarely needs to be memorized. A route stored in a GPS system rarely needs to be remembered. A fact stored online can be retrieved instantly whenever it becomes useful. Instead of storing information internally, people rely on external tools to hold it for them. This strategy is efficient, but it changes the way memory is used. Ancient humans had fewer opportunities to offload information. As a result, they may have spent far more time actively exercising memory than most modern people. Their brains were constantly practicing the skills required to store, organize, and retrieve information. This does not mean ancient humans were biologically superior. It means they lived in an environment that demanded stronger memory habits. The human brain adapts to the challenges it faces most often. For our ancestors, memory was a daily necessity rather than an occasional convenience. And that difference may explain why modern people sometimes underestimate just how powerful human memory can be. Because the truth is that our brains have not become weaker. The world around them has simply changed. The modern world sometimes creates the impression that human memory is getting worse. Many people struggle to remember phone numbers, directions, birthdays, shopping lists, or information they recently encountered online. Compared with our ancestors, this can make it seem as though modern humans are less capable of remembering important things. The reality is far more interesting. Human brains have not changed dramatically since the time of ancient hunter-gatherers. The biological machinery responsible for memory remains remarkably similar to the machinery carried by our ancestors. What changed was the environment in which that machinery operates. Ancient humans lived in a world where memory was constantly exercised and regularly rewarded. Modern humans live in a world where information is often stored outside the brain. Technology allows us to access knowledge instantly without needing to remember every detail ourselves. This is not necessarily a weakness. In many ways, it is an efficient adaptation to a world overflowing with information. The challenge is that efficiency can sometimes disguise the true capabilities of human memory. When people stop practicing a skill regularly, the skill often appears weaker, even though the underlying capacity remains. The same principle applies to memory. Ancient humans trained memory every day because survival demanded it. Modern people often train different abilities because modern life rewards different skills. Yet evidence from memory competitions, oral traditions, and cognitive research suggests that the human brain remains capable of extraordinary feats of recall. With the right motivation, practice, and techniques, modern individuals can remember astonishing amounts of information. The capacity never disappeared. The necessity did. This realization changes the way we should think about our ancestors. They were not superhuman. They simply lived in a world that constantly encouraged the development of powerful memory habits. Their survival depended on remembering landscapes, stories, relationships, resources, and countless details about their environment. Those demands shaped the way memory was used every single day. The next time you forget a phone number because it is stored in your contacts list, remember that your ancestors faced a completely different challenge. They carried maps without paper. They preserved libraries without books. They transmitted knowledge across generations without writing. They relied on stories, landmarks, repetition, and constant practice to keep information alive. And perhaps the most surprising lesson is that the same brain capable of doing all those things still exists inside your head today. Your ancestors were not necessarily born with better memories. They simply had stronger reasons to use them. Memory therefore influenced nearly every aspect of daily life. Psychologists sometimes describe this phenomenon as cognitive offloading.